The audience shifted in their seats, eyes aimed to the front. In their minds, a dizzying panoply of words came streaming. Intellect, brilliance, provocative, evolutionary, revolutionary, avant-garde, gracious, grateful, reflective. Friends, family, festivity, ebullience, inspirational, motivational, engaging. And they all wanted to know what it would be. The silence was deafening. You could cut the air with a knife. The tension was building, and then the answer came. 4 little words. Just wait and see. In one of the most famous inaugural professorial lectures, Lord Acton in 1895 at the University of Cambridge began his lecture by saying, "Good evening, fellow students." When I look around the room and I see the myriad of dignitaries and officials and academic personnel and members of society from all sectors and walks of life, law, medicine, education, the arts, the sciences, that would not suffice. In short, no butters in Benzes have been spotted. And so, the most honorable Professor Denise Eldemeyer Scherer, and I want to make sure that I've got my list together. Yes. Former Attorney General, Senator the Honorable Arnold A.J. Nicholson, former Cabinet Secretary and former Head of the Civil Service, the Honorable Dr. Carlton Davis, former Principal of the Mona campus, Professor the Honorable Elsa Leo-Riney, Acting Deputy Principal of the Mona campus and Principal Director of the Office of Research, Innovation and Partnerships, Professor Marvin Reed, Dean of the Faculty of Medical Sciences, Professor Joseph Plummer, Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Education, Dr. Dion Edwards-Carr, Deputy Deans from the Faculty of Medical Sciences, Dr. Roxanne Melbourne Chambers, Dr. Annette Crawford Sykes, Dr. Merton Smith, and former Deputy Dean of Research, Professor Michael Boyne, heads of institutes and departments, Professor Marshall Tuller-Reed from CARE, the Caribbean Institute of Health Research, Director of the Mona and Aging Wellness Center, Dr. Dula-Dane Tyndale, heads of department, Dr. Karen Gordon, School of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences, Dr. Abigail Harrison, Child Health and Adolescent Health, Dr. Marilyn Lawrence Wright, Medicine, former heads of the Department of Community Health and Psychiatry, Professor Wendell Aber, Professor Brendan Bain, and some very special guests who must be acknowledged. Perhaps online joining us, Senator Dr. Kenneth Connell from Barbados, Professor Catherine Thiol from Tulane University, who is here with us, Professor the Honorable Errol Morrison, who may be online, if not here, Professor Emeritus Rainford Wilkes, yes, you're here, former Director of the Epidemiological Unit at the then TMRI, Dr. Peter Knight, former Chief Executive Officer of the National Environmental and Planning Agency, Dr. Jacqueline Bisesa McKenzie, Chief Medical Officer of Health, Ministry of Health and Wellness, Reverend Dr. Ralph Hoyt from the United Church of Jamaica, various officials from the Ministry of Health, various members of UWI and departments, staff, students, friends, and the general public. I am not yet going to say good evening because there is a special group of persons who I want to particularly acknowledge. Members of the family of Professor Cunningham-Myrie, Mr. Ian Myrie, the immediate family, husband, Dr. Stephanie Myrie, daughter, Mr. Alexander Myrie, son, and Mrs. Levis Cunningham, mother. Now I can say good evening. And yet there is one more. I am looking, and special welcome to Professor Colette Andrea Cunningham-Myrie, our guest of honor, or honoree, the focus of tonight's function. Inaugural lectures often provide us, both in academia and the public, with some idea of the work and journey of the professor who is speaking, some idea of their research, their intellectual prowess, but also they provide some idea about the persona. And I wish to say that Professor Colette Cunningham-Myrie is a woman of faith. And it would be only prudent that we grace this evening's proceedings with an invocation from the Reverend Dr. Ralph Hoyt.
I take it it's okay for me to say good evening. It's difficult, very difficult to follow that presentation. I want to begin with a disclaimer for when the Honorable Professor called or texted me and asked me to do an invocation. I said, I wonder what that word means by. So I said, I'm not taking any chance because it's a big time lecture. So I went to the dictionary. And the dictionary told me that invocation means the action of invoking someone or something, or an incantation used to invoke a deity or the supernatural. And so when I read that, I said, Professor, how do you invoke the presence of someone who is already here and who is always here? Well, one of the names of the Messiah, as we all know, well, sorry, some of us know, is Emmanuel, which means, right. So then I looked again at the text that Colette sent me, and I said, she explained what invocation meant. She said, just to make sure that I got it. Say the opening prayer. And so I say to you this afternoon, suppose we see prayer not as petition, but as conversation. Suppose we understand prayer not as importunity, but as an opportunity to listen and understand and respond. I hope you will agree with that perspective, because I want you to share with me in the imagination of Archbishop Desmond Tutu from South Africa, the late Archbishop. Archbishop Tutu wrote a book some time ago which he entitled, God Has a Dream. And I just want to share a few words of these opening remarks. The opening voice in the conversation is the voice of God. Before any human petition, God speaks. And this is what God says. I have a dream. Please help me to realize it. It is a dream of a world where ugliness and squalor and poverty, its war and hostility, its greed and harsh competitiveness, its alienation and disharmony are changed into their glorious counterparts, when there will be more laughter and joy and peace, where there will be justice and goodness and compassion and love and caring and sharing. I have a dream, God says, that swords will be beaten into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks, and that my children will know that they are members of one family, the human family, God's family, my family. Oh, if you will take a moment to be quiet and see if you can hear that voice that I just imagined speaking to us this evening. You may bow your heads and close your eyes if you so desire. And so, gracious God, on behalf of the one who has come to guide us on an unexpected journey, on behalf of the Department of Community Health and Psychiatry, on behalf of the University of the West Indies, with its alumni spread far and wide, we say to you, O God, that we have accepted our mission. As we gather in this room today, we respond to your request, and we say to you, individually and collectively, that we are willing and ready to dream the impossible dream and to fight the unbeatable foe. We say to you that we are willing even to march into hell for our heavenly cause. And now we are ready to listen to the instructions and inspiration of your new Messiah, Colette, as she presents a new prescription for the realization of your dream. May it be your will, O God, that when we rise from our seats, we will rise not merely as academics or students, but as disciples enlisting for a revolutionary journey. May our collective dreams be translated into glorious reality. With hope and thanksgiving, we present our prayers and wishes to you. If you agree, will you join and say, Amen. Amen.
I am still reeling from the reading of that noble and distinguished list of dignitaries, and I need some oxygen. I have come prepared. That is really a segue to warn people that you do not have to say the entire list. And for the rest of the program, should you so desire, it is okay to use all protocols observed or any other variant of. There is no more oxygen left in the tank. Having said that, I want to go into the next set of speakers and tributes. However, I must say that I'm a little disappointed because the presenters will be doing this using technology beyond my years by video tributes. Consequently, I had planned to handcuff anybody who had taken too long and have them euthanized if they resisted, using the latest technology from a certain agency that is known for its ice-cold methods in another jurisdiction. But I put them away because I will not need them. Suffice it to say that there are two speakers to come to which these rules do not apply. Professor Cunningham-Myrie herself. It is her day, unlimited privileges are due. And also to the person who will introduce Professor Cunningham-Myrie, Dean Professor Joseph Plummer, who, in his own right, such privileges accrue, but also from a practical sense, he's my boss and I have no wish to be fired. In our professor's life and in the academic life, in most universities, we find three dimensions are often recognized: public service, teaching, and research. And there is no question in my mind that in the case of Professor Cunningham-Myrie, those dimensions are broad and immense. And so we are going to be asking a couple of people through their video presentations to talk about Professor Cunningham-Myrie's prowess in these particular areas. Tributes from Professor Errol Morrison, tributes from Dr. Kenneth Connell in terms of public service. And as Professor Cunningham-Myrie tells me, these people have tremendously influenced her in the areas of public advocacy and engagement in the political sphere for the advancement of health. With regard to teaching, Dr. Heather Reed Jones from the Southeastern Region Health Authority, who is described as a friend, a mentee, a mentor rather, and a confidant, and really somebody who has been there for years. Dr. Aileen Standard Goldser, a teacher, someone who helped shape the career in family medicine. Dr. Novi Younger Coleman, Colette, and I shall use the first name in this case, describes her as a sister. Somebody who's always in her corner. She will share her reflections. And Dr. Craig Bryan, a former student, now colleague, out of the University of McGill, and whose stint in experimental medicine resulted and perhaps blossomed from the engagement and constant dialogue with Professor Cunningham-Myrie. When I think about the teaching, I often think of the great Greek triad, Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, all of whom were essentially leaders, teachers, and students at some point in life. You can decide on the list who is Socrates, who is Plato, and who is Aristotle. And so, to the videos.
What started off as volunteerism and a hobby blossomed and fructified and engulfed this young practitioner who would dedicate over half her life to service to her fellow men and pursuit of excellence through scholarship.
Professor Reed, you have never guided me wrong. Yeah, I'm just giving them a few moments.
What started off as volunteerism
While they are sorting that out,
blossomed
I might
and
take the
fructified
opportunity
and
to
engulfed
also just recognize that there are also tributes coming in the area of research. Tributes from Professor Catherine Thiol from the University of Tulane. And she has flown to be here for this occasion. That tells you the relationship Professor Myrie has within the international arena. Professor Marvin Reed. Colette says she can't find the words to describe you.
Clone is all right.
And Professor Rainford Wilkes. Colette describes it as friends sometime, arguing sometime, but always loving and guiding and never steering her wrong. So, those tributes are to come.
What started off as volunteerism and a hobby blossomed and fructified and engulfed this young practitioner who would dedicate over half her life to service to her fellow men and pursuit of excellence through scholarship. Colleagues and friends, it is my great honor, privilege, and kudos to bring this greeting on behalf of the diabetes diaspora in general and the Diabetes Association of Jamaica in particular. We thank you, dear Colette, for the over 3 decades of service, advocacy, representation both locally and regionally, as well as internationally, and for your invitation to share this moment of recognition with you. From the ebullience, effervescence, meticulousness, and tenacity which you have exhibited over the years, we think this honor and appointment most deserving. And in one celebratory unison, we doff our hats to you, dear Colette, on the recognition of your academic contributions and selfless service over the years. And we are indeed happy to enjoin the congratulatory proclamation, Dr. Colette Cunningham-Myrie, Professor of Public Health, Epidemiology, and Family Medicine. I thank you.
Distinguished colleagues, esteemed academics, partners in health advocacy, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, and of course, our Gen Z and Gen Alpha students across the University of the West Indies, likely also joining us virtually. Good evening. It is my privilege to stand before you on behalf of the Healthy Caribbean Coalition to celebrate a moment that is richly deserved and entirely fitting. The first professorial lecture of Professor Colette Cunningham-Myrie. Professor Cunningham-Myrie is a scholar, physician, advocate, and mentor whose work tells not only the story of an individual career, but the story of Caribbean public health itself, its challenges, its resilience, and its insistence on equity. Her contribution to regional health advocacy predates many of the institutions we now rely on. In the early 2000s, she was part of the Caribbean Commission on Health and Development team, chaired by Sir George Allen, that undertook groundbreaking research on economic costs of diabetes and hypertension. That work helped Caribbean leaders see, in very concrete terms, that non-communicable diseases were not just a health issue, but a developmental issue. Those findings fed directly into the Commission's report to CARICOM heads of government and helped lay the foundation for the 2007 Port of Spain Declaration on NCDs. And it was out of that declaration that the Healthy Caribbean Coalition was formed. So in a very real sense, Colette did not simply join the Healthy Caribbean Coalition. She really created the conditions that made the coalition necessary. Her leadership continued in 2012 when she played a key editorial role in publishing the proceedings of the Caribbean NCD Prevention and Strategic Planning meeting held right there in Kingston, Jamaica, an important step in translating political commitment into coordinated regional action. Together with her long-standing NCD research and her volunteer service with the Diabetes Association of Jamaica since 1993, these contributions made her a natural voice for civil society leadership. From 2020 to 2025, she served with distinction on the board of the Healthy Caribbean Coalition as a director, helping to guide our organization through a particularly demanding and transformative time, which included, of course, a pandemic. In our work at HCC, Professor Cunningham-Myrie has always reminded us that non-communicable diseases are not simply clinical outcomes, but they're social ones, shaped by food systems, trade policy, and the environments that we live in. Colette has insisted that advocacy must be evidence-informed, but also people-centered. And I want to repeat that. She has insisted that advocacy must be evidence-informed, but also people-centered. She captured this philosophy beautifully in 4 simple words. Let's do better for our children. And if I may add a touch of light humor this evening, Anyone who has served on a committee with Professor Cunningham-Myrie knows her special talent for asking the one question, just as we think we're finished, that reminds us we need to think a little deeper. It's a gift, and we are all better for it. Today's lecture formally recognizes her as a professor, but many of us have been listening to a professor for some time now, long before the title became official. As president of the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, let me say this clearly, and without any footnotes. Our work is better because of you, Colette. Better because you have insisted that evidence must serve people, not just impress reviewers. And better because you've reminded us why this work matters. The region needs your voice as much now as ever. We are grateful that you continue to lend it with clarity, integrity, and care. Congratulations, Professor Cunningham-Myrie. May your scholarship continue to challenge us, your leadership continue to guide us, and your questions continue to keep us on our toes. Thank you.
Colleagues and friends, I'm truly privileged to be sharing in this celebration of a crowning achievement for my friend Colette. Can you believe it has been 40 years, come September, that we would have been friends? Today, I want to speak specifically to her tenure as course coordinator for the final year medical students, a role in which she has left an indelible mark. I believe her contribution can be summed up in 3 words: content, quality, and care. Content. Exams must be passed, of course, but this clerkship was never just about exams. It was about shaping good, well-rounded doctors. Colette emphasized the art of medicine, understanding the social determinants of health, seeing those unseen forces that shape a patient's life and integrating them into their care. I recall my own early involvement as an associate lecturer with the development of the infamous procedure sheet, dreaded by students, yes, but invaluable. It covered practical skills, disease surveillance, and we all know since 2020 how important that is, triaging when overwhelmed, performing pap smears, administering immunizations. For those who would never specialize, this was their first real taste of what a practice, whether public or private, would look like and feel like. That was Colette's vision: content that mattered, content that prepared. Quality. Even those who have an aversion to community health, and I have one of those in my family, will admit this clerkship was hands down the best organized in final year. Structured placements, a buddy system, preparation for the MBBS final exam, and most importantly, instant feedback. Students knew where they stood, what to improve, and when to celebrate success. Moreover, unlike other rotations, Colette ensured that the painstakingly prepared case notes were marked, corrected, and returned, even down to the grammar and proofreading. That level of rigor showed students that their effort was respected and that their learning mattered. Care. But what truly sets Colette apart is her care. She advocated for students facing hardship, bending the rules when humanity demanded it. Case in point was that student who had limited bush jackets and wore scrubs to the health center, which was a no-no. She made sure that missed lectures were made up, even teaching them herself. She has even gone so far as to cook a meal for students in anticipation of a long, hard day, reminding them that they were seen and supported. And then there was that student who was caught out taking a sick day. The ensuring discourse, as you might expect, shall we say, it was spirited. Yet, when the time came, Colette did something unheard of in my 40 years of medicine. She publicly apologized to the student during the debriefing session. That humility, that humanity is rare, and it's left a lasting impression. So this is my friend. No nonsense, high standards with genuine care. Colette, with one L and two T's, sincere congratulations from my entire family. I'm so proud of you, fellow classmate from the class of 1991, and my friend, who continues to shine so brightly for public health in our beloved country. Thank you.
Good evening, all. It is my immense pleasure to speak today on behalf of a dear colleague, Professor Colette Cunningham-Myrie, on the occasion of her inaugural professorial lecture. Much will be said about her academic prowess, and this is evident in her elevation to the level of professor. But I want to share with you some thoughts about Colette the teacher. The word teacher may be defined as a person who helps others to acquire knowledge, competencies, or values. Certainly, Colette has the expertise and skills to impart knowledge. She ensures that whatever course she is delivering, the lesson plan is well thought out, the background reading material is available, all the necessary elements to impart the knowledge are present. But beyond that, as a teacher, Colette cares about her students. She does not just teach about empathy, she exhibits empathy. She sees things from the point of view of the students and seeks to help them along the way. This does not mean that she is easy on them. No, no, no. They do need to show mastery of the subject matter, but the care is also always there. An example of her going beyond the classroom teaching is her interaction as the coordinator of the undergraduate Year 5 clerkship in the Department of Community Health and Psychiatry. She not only lectures students on clinical skills and assigns them to health centers for their clinical experience, but while they are in the health centers in various parts of the corporate area, she visits them. There she talks to them, she talks to their preceptors, she seeks to understand any issues they may be having and works to resolve these. While I was coordinator of the Family Medicine Postgraduate Program, Colette mounted an optional module for us on epidemiology, something very close to her heart. Not only did she share from her vast wealth of experience in the area, but she enlisted the assistance of erudite colleagues to enhance the residents' learning experience. Again, her attention to detail and her involvement with the residents was second to none. As a teacher, she may be firm or even strict, but she is always fair. She always wants to make sure that those she is teaching understand the material, can analyze and interpret the material, and can apply it in real life situations. As a teacher, Colette has excelled. I congratulate her on the well-deserved elevation to the level of professor, and I know that she will continue to excel. Best wishes, Professor Colette Cunningham-Myrie.
It is my pleasure to pay tribute to my friend and colleague, Professor Colette Cunningham-Myrie. Colette is an educator for whom I have the utmost respect. She cares deeply for the students under her tutelage, even if she only spends a single session with them. She always wants to leave them with a lasting impression of the value of the concept she presents to them at the time. And one of the things I enjoy most is watching Colette teach. Her interactions with her students are very engaging, enlightening. The students are challenged and encouraged to strive for excellence and to want to know more. I have had to lean on her quite heavily over the years as I draw on her expertise in delivery of training for our research skills training workshops that we offer at the Caribbean Institute for Health Research. And these workshops bring in individuals who may feel that they're at sea with respect to their understanding of research methods. But when Colette brings them into a session, she really takes them from being at sea to persons who are hopeful that they could actually have a career in research. And though she left care and joined the Department of Community Health in 2012, she has continued to collaborate with our training team to facilitate learning in the Institute's Master of Science in Epidemiology degree program and in the postgraduate diploma in health research. And because of the breadth of her intellect, she has been able to serve as lecturer and facilitate learning in a range of topics, and ranging even from principles in epidemiology to statistics to, social determinants of health. And her tutelage has had these students left them with more than a cursory knowledge of and the ability to apply epidemiological concepts. She challenges them to become persons who can use and articulate well concepts in epidemiology as they should as epidemiologists. Another feature of her work that I really admire is her insistence on ensuring that her students succeed. I have known of her to organize bootcamp sessions with students to spend quality time with them so that they can be prepared for whatever, end of year or end of series assessments that they require. I've watched her prepare course material for students and just working hard, taking great pains and pleasure to give it her best shot. Even if it's something that she's done before, she started the year before, it's not going to be the same thing. And she's handling the preparation as though she's doing it for the first time. So these tools that she has created have facilitated the highest levels of learning and comprehension. And although an expert in her field, she will always draw on expertise and experience of her peers to ensure that her course delivery is based on clarity of expression and leads to ease of comprehension and application. It really is my greatest pleasure to watch Colette's career advance to the point where she's now at the level of professor of epidemiology and public health. I applaud you, my friend and big sister, and I continue to wish for you every success as you continue to inspire and uplift the many students that cross your path. Because I know that you're not just an educator, you are a mentor to the students, and I will let your secret out. Sometimes you are another mother, another big sister. And so I crave for you every blessing as you move through the additional doors that God will open for you. mammoth success to you, my friend. Congratulations on this great achievement.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Craig Bryan. I am an internal medicine physician and a fellow in respirology, and I have the profound privilege of knowing and being guided by Professor Cunningham-Myrie for nearly 11 years. Before I begin, I ask that you join me in recognizing what today truly represents. This is not simply the celebration of a professorship. It is the formal acknowledgement of a legacy that has already shaped generations. There are teachers, there are mentors, there are sponsors, and then very rarely there are individuals whose influence becomes foundational, so deeply woven into your journey that you cannot separate who you have become from their guidance. For me, Professor Cunningham-Myrie is that person. When I first encountered her as a medical student, research felt very intimidating, abstract, distant, and technical. Yet she had the extraordinary ability to make epidemiology feel alive. She transformed data into narrative, statistics into stories about real communities. She taught us that research was not merely about numbers. It was about responsibility, justice, and service. That early exposure changed my trajectory. In 2018, when I was invited to present in France, I turned to her. She helped me refine my content, challenged me to deepen my understanding, and ensured that I was not simply presenting, but representing. She prepared me to stand confidently on an international stage, grounded in rigorous science and cultural awareness. That moment was not accidental, it was cultivated. In 2019, when I began exploring the possibility of pursuing a master's in family medicine, she again offered guidance. She provided insight into academic pathways, connected me to appropriate mentors, and when her own commitments prevented direct supervision, she modeled something equally important: stewardship. She did not simply say no, she directed me thoughtfully, suggesting where and how to seek support. She understood that mentorship is not possession, it's simply positioning. When I pursued experimental medicine, she supported that endeavor with the same dedication. She lent her credibility through letters of recommendation that carried weight across borders. She sponsored my ambitions, not just by advising, but by attaching her name and reputation to my potential. That belief followed me. It followed me into my graduate training, it followed me into residency in internal medicine, and ultimately it helped shape my path into respirology, also known as pulmonology. Every transition, every pivot, and every decision to narrow or expand my focus was met not with hesitation, but with steady encouragement. She supported each step fully. She helped me think critically about where I could contribute the most meaningfully. And when she felt another mentor might better refine a specific skill set, she blended seamlessly into a network of guidance, recommended collaborators, suggesting leaders in the field, ensuring that I was always growing in the right direction. She did not hold me close for comfort. She propelled me forward with confidence. And I've witnessed this with not only in my own personal life, but also in her support for my colleagues with equal intensity. One of my close colleagues completed a master's in family medicine and secured residency training at the #1 family medicine program in Canada. She's now an addiction specialist, and she often pays tribute to the formative experiences and intellectual grounding she gained under Professor Cunningham-Myrie's mentorship. Professor Myrie emphasized on the social determinants of health and structural inequities, and those lessons did not remain theoretical. They shaped our clinical identity. That is her reach. She prepares physicians not only to practice medicine, but to understand context, power, inequity, and responsibility. And today, my involvement in anti-Black racism initiatives, equity, diversity, and inclusion work, and broader advocacy efforts in Canada is directly rooted in the lens she helped develop. Long before these topics became widely institutionalized, she was teaching us to see health through the framework of social justice. She was embedding in us an understanding that epidemiology is inseparable from lived experience. She prepared us to think structurally, to lead ethically, and to serve intentionally. And so when I say that our career paths, mine and those of my colleagues, are a direct tribute to Professor Cunningham-Myrie, I do not say it lightly. Our trajectories are testimony. Testimony to a teacher who goes beyond curriculum. Testimony to a mentor who remains present across continents. Testimony to a sponsor who opens doors and steps back so her students can walk through them confidently. Professor Cunningham-Myrie has shaped not only my career, but my character. So tonight, as we celebrate her inaugural lecture, we are witnessing a milestone that formalizes what many of us have long known. Her influence has always been professorial. Her impact has always been international, and her legacy has always been generational. Professor Cunningham-Myrie, thank you for preparing me for the country, the region, and beyond. Thank you for believing in my potential before it had proof. And thank you for modeling what it means to combine brilliance with humanity. The title of professor honors your scholarship, but your true distinction lives in the lives you have elevated. And I stand here, as do many others across the world, as living proof of your influence. Congratulations, Professor. Your title has finally caught up with your legacy.
And before we, well, I'm good. And before we touch on research, with such a background and context set in terms of her teaching, I might want to direct you to something that you can do after the lecture is over. You can go to Professor Cunningham-Myrie's site. I call it her teaching site. And if you do, you can peruse and browse. It has quite a nice layout. The introduction, characterized by a beautiful, smiling, welcoming picture, and really speaking to elements that pervade all her teaching. There's a short professional bio. There is an elaboration on her teaching philosophy that no student should be left behind. If you go further, you'll see her self-statement concerning effective teaching, scholarship, and there you'll find unsolicited letters of commendation. Just read them, and you'll be actually surprised at the authenticity and the emotions that are expressed within. And if you want to peruse more, you can actually go to the development of the UWI graduate, her vision, and its coalescence with the broader philosophy of the UWI itself. And if you have not yet seen her in action in her lectures, this picture is merely a preview of what is to come. Finally, once you go and you are so moved and you just cannot help yourself, just contact her. The information is all there. So I'm sure we'll provide you with all the links, but I'm sure if you type in Colette Cunningham-Myrie and the teaching portfolio, etc., we'll be able to actually get there. Yes, prowess in teaching, matched by prowess in research.
Distinguished members of the Academy, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I begin with congratulations to Dr. Colette Cunningham-Myrie on her elevation to a professorial chair, the highest rung of the academic ladder. It is my delight and privilege to pay tribute to Professor Colette Cunningham-Myrie on the occasion of her inaugural professorial lecture. Our acquaintance goes back a couple of decades to when she was pursuing a master's in public health in what is now the Department of Community Health and Psychiatry. She was one of the more talented members of the group, but it was her inquisitive mind that caught my attention. I later found out that her record of scholastic accomplishments dated back to her days in prep school. Epidemiology is, by definition, an inquiring vocation, and she was clearly in her element during this particular course. Our paths subsequently coincided in many areas, including her tenure at the Caribbean Institute for Health Research, CARE, where I was on staff, my involvement in her doctoral studies, and our collaboration on several studies. In addition to her training and experience in public health and family medicine, Colette had pursued formal training in management studies. This combination made her invaluable to our research program on the epidemiology of cardiovascular diseases and their risk factors in a developing world context. Epidemiology not only estimates disease burden and identifies risk factors, but also recommends interventions and predicts their likely impact. This requires a sophisticated approach to complex scenarios. Colette brought to our collaboration a clear understanding of systems thinking and the need for structures, systems, processes, and human resources in any endeavor to solve problems. The research program on chronic non-communicable diseases in the Epidemiology Research Unit at CARE has been successful in many ways, as evidenced by the conduct of 3 national surveys. These studies have benefited staff and student scholarship, national and international collaboration, and has made a significant contribution to health policy development. Professor Cunningham-Myrie has made a valuable contribution to this body of work. Professor Cunningham-Myrie has been an important partner in my own research career, and I'm grateful to her and proud of her achievements. She has been a valuable contributor to research at the University of the West Indies, and the collaboration between the UWI and the Ministry of Health and Wellness, which has facilitated policy development and impact. I wish her continued success and hope that she can mentor and develop young health scientists as she was mentored. In this way, we will continue to build and strengthen Jamaica's and the region's research capacity. I wish her all the best in the rest of her career.
Hello, my name is Dr. Catherine Thial, or Kat, or Kathy, as Colette calls me, and I'm a professor here at Tulane University School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine in New Orleans, Louisiana. I first met Colette during her Tulane experience as a Humphrey Fellow. She was an extremely curious and motivated student who reached out to me about my class on social determinants of health. We quickly became close colleagues and continued to work together during her time at Tulane. This included projects with the wonderful CARE team, scientific manuscripts, and grant applications. Our collaboration continued to grow following her return to Jamaica and continued to strengthen. She was able to return here at Tulane for some of her dissertation work, And I had the honor of serving on her dissertation committee and seeing her bring to fruition all the amazing research on social determinants that she had been building and which she's so passionate about. She's truly been a leader in this space in your amazing country. Colette was instrumental in my receiving a Fulbright Scholar Award in 2017, where I was able to spend more time in Jamaica with the goal of continuing to build the work around social determinants of health. And the work continues since that experience. Colette, this promotion is a well-deserved recognition of your outstanding dedication, tireless research, and unwavering commitment to academic excellence that can have a true impact on community. You do this not only through your research, but also your amazing mentorship and genuine care for your students and your colleagues. You've taught me just as much as I've taught you, professionally and personally, and I'm forever grateful for your friendship and mentorship. As you step into this new role, I have no doubt that your visionary approach will continue to elevate UE and the work in Jamaica to new heights. I'm so proud of you and so glad that I'm able to celebrate this moment with you.
Good evening, colleagues. My name is Marvin Reed, Principal Director of the Office of Research, Innovation and Partnership at the University of the West Indies. I've been asked by my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Cunningham-Myrie, to give you a brief synopsis of her journey, with particular reference to her career as a researcher and, to a lesser extent, her career as a teacher. I occupy a unique perspective in terms of looking at that journey and assessing that journey. For some historical context, I was then director of the sickle cell unit, and as part of that role, I wanted to create a strategic plan for where it is I wanted to take the unit. Having looked at the clinical offerings that I inherited, I made a strategic decision that we were best served by having broad-based, family practitioner-based physicians to do a lot of the clinical work. But I wanted to expand the research profile from one that was focused primarily on clinical epidemiology to one that encompassed public health as well as clinical trials. In order to do that, it was necessary for me to refresh or renew the staff or the cadre of staff that we had at the sickle cell unit at the time. And that led me on an active recruitment drive. I'm proud to say that Dr. Cunningham-Myrie represents one of my recruits for which I'm most proud. I think last year or the year before, you were graced with one of the other recruits, that is Professor Monica Snani. But this year, our focus will be on Professor Cunningham-Myrie. Cunningham-Myrie came to me with strong references about the fact that she was pretty good in public health. She had field experience. And in order to recruit her from the ministry, I'd reached out to her initially by a phone call, and we had lunch. We had a lunch date. And at that lunch date, I explained to her my vision for the sickle cell unit and asked her if she would join me on that journey. She didn't give me an immediate response, as was typical. She had to ruminate on it, to discuss it, and then she came back and said yes. Well, that yes was conditional. I had to provide her with a lot more details of what the job entailed, what were some. One of the things you learn when you deal with her is how meticulous she is. She wants to make sure that the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. And she became a member of our team as a research officer at the time, medical stroke research officer at the sickle cell unit. While there, she opted to pursue the DM in family medicine under my supervision. And in doing that DM, one of the requirements was to do a research project. And she opted to look at patients and satisfaction with the clinic. One of the things that makes a researcher, there are several attributes that makes a successful researcher. I'm just going to list a few in my own perspective, and then let's describe how it is that Cunningham-Myrie achieved all of those and matched with all of those. So clearly, you have to be inquisitive. Clearly, you have to be unsatisfied with the status quo. And therefore, with that, you then formulate what we call a research question. You also have to have perseverance, because many times the research will sometimes be long, there will be barriers that were unforeseen, and so resilience is an important component of being a successful researcher. The third one has to do with the fact that you really have to have not too much of a big ego, because you have to be able to accept advice and correction. You have to also be willing to seek advice. You have to be obsessive compulsive. You have to make sure that you continue until everything is right. Those are perhaps more important attributes than being academically gifted, because the truth be told, research is really just a process by which one engages in answering a question using standardized methodology. So having said that, Dr. Cunningham-Myrie research looked at some specific techniques or involved some specific techniques that we hadn't yet done at the sickle cell unit. But not to be daunted, she went around and we explored various options until it was that we were able to define the problem and answer the question in a very robust way, so much so that it became, not only did she get the DM in family medicine, but we also were able to publish the particular data. So Dr. Cunningham-Myrie continued with us at the sickle cell unit, and then she transitioned over to the epidemiological research unit, where she was involved in many of the activities that the epidemiological unit did. After a while, her teaching bug, and I said I would briefly describe some of that. Her teaching bug got to her, and she moved across to the Department of Community Health and Psychiatry, where she spent many years until her most recent promotion, where she's now Deputy Dean in the Faculty of Medical Sciences. While she was at the Epidemiological Research Unit, we continued to collaborate on many research ideas and many research projects. But the one that I particularly enjoyed was when she approached me to say she's interested in understanding some of the social dynamics, what we call social epidemiology. What are some of the social factors that contribute to the non-communicable disease burden that we have in Jamaica? She had some specific ideas as it relates to the role of gender in the causation or the implication or association with non-communicable disease. But she was also interested in understanding from a public health lens why people would not engage in something simple like exercise. We often preach that, exercise, you must do so much exercise per day, and that will help reduce the burden. And one of the public health strategies at the time was whether or not investment in public parks or in the urban space may help ameliorate or mitigate the non-communicable disease. And so having joined and having been exposed to some of these public health methodology through our sojourn at Tulane University, we met up with her collaborators there, and we created a little project, and for which she asked me to see if we could assist in getting some funding for. The long and short of that story is that we were able to do the study at Emancipation Park and compared it to issues related to papain, and was able to write a technical document which we think have been used by the ministry to influence their outlook on some of these social determinants of non-communicable disease. She has since gone on and collaborated with many other individuals to expand this particular area of research, a much needed area of research and understanding of why is it as a community we continue to have these non-communicable disease and what are some of the possible solutions. Dr. Cunningham-Myrie has also been a very good teacher, and my observations for that is really because of the fact that oftentimes her students have given her fantastic grades in terms of how she's been able to relate to them, how she has been able to arrange, just act as a mentor for them and their development. So as she continued to grow and continued on this journey, she did her DRPH. So not only did she do the DM in family medicine, but she also did a doctorate in public health. She has also done consultancies at the Pan American Health Organization. And together, I think all of these experiences has made Dr. Cunningham-Myrie an excellent researcher, an excellent mentor, an excellent tutor. She's also a friend. She's not afraid to speak her mind. She gives you honest opinion. And if there's one thing that all of us will admire about her is her strong grounding in ethics. She's very ethical in terms of her approach to issues. And I think that will continue to redound to her continued success. So colleagues and friends, it's indeed my pleasure. Just to give you a brief synopsis of the person who's going to be speaking today, I want to tell her wholeheartedly my congratulations on a job well done. She did it the old-fashioned way by tilling the soil, working the vineyard. So congratulations on your achievement, and I look forward to listening to you as you describe as part of your journey in your inaugural professorial discourse this evening. Thank you.
I am told that not everything that you read and that has been generated by AI you should believe. But when the dean comes to say some words, you should believe. And so I'm going to invite Professor Joseph Plummer to the podium to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Dr. James. Good evening, colleagues. I'm not sure there's more that I can say after listening to the distinguished set of speakers via video. But I'll try as the Dean of the Faculty of Medical Sciences and as the first person, Professor Colette Cunningham-Myrie has asked to introduce the first opportunity to introduce a speaker at an inaugural lecture. I'll try. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker and truly the lady of the hour, Colette Cunningham-Myrie, who is a professor of public health, epidemiology, and family medicine in the Department of Community Health and Psychiatry, Faculty of Medical Sciences at UWI Mona campus. Her academic career is both distinguished and deeply inspiring. Not just to me personally, I've known Colette since I've started medical school in 1990, but I'm sure, and as you have heard, to the hundreds of students, residents, and colleagues, plus patients who should have encountered. I'll start by saying she's proudly an Andrews girl, where she's where she served as deputy head girl before matriculating to the University of the West Indies, where she earned her MBBS as a member of the class of 1991. Perhaps not entirely satisfied to the extent to which the MBBS program equipped her with management and leadership skills, and perhaps also influenced by the wisdom and encouragement of her father, she pursued a postgraduate diploma in management studies in 1996 within the Faculty of Social Sciences. Yet, the Faculty of Medical Sciences was always at her core. She therefore went on to complete a master's in public health in 1999 and a master's in family medicine in 2006, and ultimately her Doctor of Public Health, awarded with high commendation in 2018, all from the University of the West Indies. In 2011, she was awarded a Fulbright scholarship, which took her to Tulane University, where she completed the prestigious year-long Herbert H. Humphrey Fellowship in Research Methods, Social Epidemiology, and Global Health. Today, she stands firmly as a community health and public health specialist in the long and proud tradition of scholars from this university, whom she can call mentors, colleagues, and friends. Among them, the late Sir Kenneth Standard, Sir George Aline, her friend, and perhaps someone who's listening here online, and Professor John Figueroa. She currently lectures in epidemiology, family medicine, and research methods to both undergrad and postgraduate students. As you would have heard, she does this well, to the extent that in 2024, she was runner-up to the UWI Guardian Award for Teaching Excellence. However, one could argue that it's more in research and public service that also Colette excels. Her academic career formally began in 2003, where she joined the Caribbean Institute of Health Research as a clinical fellow, working initially in the sickle cell unit and later in the epidemiology research unit. In 2012, she transitioned to the Department of Community Health and Psychiatry at the UWI as a lecturer and was promoted to senior lecturer in 2017, and in February 2025 was elevated to the rank of professor. I think that deserves a hand. Since August 1, 2025, she has assumed the role of Deputy Dean, Outreach and Collaboration within the Faculty of Medical Sciences at the Mona campus. And like Professor Reed, I too called Colette and asked her to be a part of the management team of the Faculty of Medical Sciences. And like Professor Reed, it's a decision that I'm proud that I've done, and I'm sure she's going to, working with the team, take the faculty to higher heights. Professor Cunningham-Myrie has established a long and impactful research portfolio, grounded in interdisciplinary collaboration locally, regionally, and internationally. As you have heard, our work focuses on chronic non-communicable diseases, not just on the individual aspects, but the intermediary and structural determinants of health, particularly obesity, physical activity or inactivity, neighborhood and gender-related influences on health outcomes within the broader social determinants of the health framework. Our research also extends into health economics, disease surveillance, and outbreak management, and has attracted grant funding totaling combined Jamaican and US dollars over $250 million. Her doctoral research, utilizing data from the Jamaica Health and Lifestyle Survey, was groundbreaking, providing the first comprehensive mapping of parish-level differences in non-communicable diseases, obesity, their associated risk factors, and their complications. Her scholarly contribution included numerous published abstracts, 1 book chapter, 34 manuscripts published in high-impact journals, peer-reviewed journals, accumulating over 800 citations with an enviable H-index of 15, and she also serves as a peer reviewer for more than 10 high-impact journals. Beyond academia, her expertise has directly influenced policy and practice. She has authored 13 technical reports for organizations such as CARICOM, the Pan American Health Organization, Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, the European Union, Cancer Research UK, and one such report, as we heard earlier, undertaken with Sir George Alleyne and others, entitled Prevention and Control of Non-Communicable Diseases with particular focus on cardiovascular disease and key risk factors such as obesity, hypertension, diabetes, and tobacco use, provided a comprehensive situational analysis of chronic non-communicable diseases in the region. This work informed the heads of government of CARICOM and ultimately contributed to the landmark Port of Spain Declaration, something that I'm sure, at least certainly when I was a medical student, all were taught. This landmark Port of Spain Declaration in 2007. Her public leadership has been particularly evident during periods of national crises. She played key roles in the Zika virus outbreak in 2016 and was deployed to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas as a consultant epidemiologist following Hurricane Dorian, and also during the COVID-19 pandemic. For this work, she was publicly acknowledged by the then Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Bahamas, Hubert Minnis. And last year, when the Ministry of Health and Wellness wanted a Director of Planning of Health Services, Professor Colette Cunningham-Myrie was the one chosen and seconded to the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Again, as we have heard earlier, since 2020, she has served on the board of Healthy Caribbean Coalition, contributing to regional advocacy in non-communicable disease prevention. Her excellence has been recognized with numerous awards, including the Caribbean Health and Research Conference 46th meeting Best Young Researcher, the Principals Award for the research project with the greatest economic and business impact in 2010, the Principals Award for the most outstanding researcher at the UWI Mona campus in 2016, the Principal Award for the best research publication within the Faculty of Medical Sciences as recent as 2020. Yet, on a more personal note, one would have thought with such work, there's no time for family life. But Colette is married to her husband, Ian. I checked at the start of the sermon. And is a proud mother of 2 children. She's a volunteer physician with the Diabetes Association of Jamaica for over 30 years and has maintained a lifelong love for music through her involvement with the university singers, and I'm told also more recently with the church choir. She's a lady with good ideas. She's not afraid to speak truth to power. That much I know. But also, she's someone who I'm proud to call a colleague and a friend. So please join me in warmly welcoming Professor Colette Cunningham-Myrie, who will enlighten us on health through a social lens, the unexpected journey.
as the UWI singers get themselves into position, I want you to know that to become a member of the UWI singers is almost a similar endeavor to trying to get into an Ivy League school. And so when you hear that Professor Cunningham-Myrie is a member of that internationally acclaimed group, you need to acknowledge such talent. And I think that the university singers are here to attest to that fact. In fact, not just simply to attest to that fact, but to sing to that fact. And so cometh the hour, cometh the man, or rather, cometh the woman, Professor Colette Cunningham-Myrie.
Need my mouse. Damien, or whoever, which? Oh, no. Good evening, everyone. I really don't think I need to give this lecture. Everybody knows everything about me. I am absolutely delighted to have you all here with me on this auspicious occasion. My inaugural professorial lecture. And I'm also wanting to not only welcome those of you that are here in front of me, but I do recognize, I'm so sorry, I'm touching all kinds of things. I do recognize that there are persons that are online as well, joining from various parts of the world. I appreciate each and every one of you that's here. That song that was just sung by the university singers was a request of mine, because this journey is not a journey that I could have done alone. And so I'm so happy to have you here. I want you all to know that I have not forgotten that many of you were a part of this unexpected journey. Many of you were there for me through the tough times. The tough times, those words are really very important to me. So thanks so much for being here. And I hope at the end of this lecture that you would have gained some insights into the past work that I have done. You've heard most of it. So I had planned this for an hour, but we may be able to cut it in half, you know, based on the fact that so much of what I want to say has already been said. This lecture is dedicated to my immediate family. I've dedicated many bits of my research to my parents, etc., but I felt that at this stage, this particular lecture should be dedicated to my husband, Ian. He's been at my side for 34 years. That's a big deal. Come on. Can you imagine staying with me? 34 years. He has some real superpowers, eh? And to my firstborn, Alexander, raise your hand. Let them see how handsome you are. You know, he didn't follow in medicine. He's a civil engineer. Transportation engineer is his subspecialty area. And Dr. Stephanie Elaine Michaela Myrie, just raise your hand, who also attended the great St. Andrew, as well as she attended our own university here for medical school. Now, I want to just sort out something that is kind of dear to my heart. You see on the screen that I have there, knighthood. Knighthood, it's really one of those honors that is, you know, bestowed on an individual, whether a man or a woman, by a king or a queen, because of special achievements. And they are given this title of Sir or Lady. You're all familiar with persons who have been knighted? Yes. So, you're my class. I've given lectures in this hall many, many times. You're my class. And so I have an MCQ for you. And you might have seen it earlier when I was fiddling around. If our Dean, Professor Joseph Plummer, were to be knighted by the King Charles today, how should he be addressed? Sir Dean? Sir Plummer? Sir Joseph? Let me see if you got it right. Sir Joseph. You're right. Now, I've been given this title of professorship. It's not as fancy as being knighted. How should I be addressed? Prof. Deputy Dean? Prof. Cunningham-Myrie? Or Prof. Colette? No, Prof. Colette. And so, Dean, I know people like to call me Professor Cunningham-Myrie. That feels a little too old-fashioned. I'm hanging around too many Gen Zs, etc. You know? And then people say, Prof, which prof you talking? Marvin? You know, Plummer? I don't know. So I would love to be called Prof. Colette. Is that okay? All right. And even if it's just for today. One L and two T's. Yes. All right. Now, I'm going to go over quite a bit of the stuff that others have done previously. You know, all these trips. Marvin, you went on too long. You went on too long, Marvin. I gave him 4 minutes, and I think you went for 10, but he's my friend. This is how we communicate all the while. But I want to get into some important definitions because I realize that the audience is a mixed one, and they say that I'm a good teacher. I don't want to leave any of your students behind. Okay? So for those of you bright ones who understand odds ratios and relative risk, I'm not going to do any of that today, because there are persons in the audience that don't understand that. So I have to drop it to a level that all of you, we don't leave anybody behind. Important definitions. The title is a very long one that I've gotten, Professor of Public Health. Do you know what public health is? Well, it's there on the screen. It's that discipline that focuses on preventing disease, prolonging life. You see, they're promoting health. But we are really big picture people. Big picture people. We are not like a lot of, say, hospital medicine folks who are interested in that one individual there. We always want to know, what do you do for the greater good of the population? So that's WHO's definition. Epidemiology, so that you understand what I do, I think Professor Wilkes in his tribute mentioned a little bit about that. It's the study of the distribution and determinants of health-related events in specific populations. And once we study it, we don't just finish so. We apply it to methods for controlling health problems. And finally, you may have heard of family medicine. Some people use the term interchangeably with general practitioner, and it's really a primary care specialty that, so we don't do a lot of work in the hospital. Actually, I hate hospital medicine. It's that specialty that we really look at we care for the family, we care for people across all ages. We are jack of all trades and maybe master of some. All. And in various jurisdictions, you may find that it's at the level of a general practitioner. But for us here, we have to get additional training. So, Marvin, I didn't finish the DM. I actually just went to the level of the Master of Family Medicine. And it requires extra training, and it emphasizes continuity of care, which is something I want to come back to very soon. We hear about NCDs in the news a lot. But what are NCDs? Non-communicable diseases. They're also known as chronic diseases. And what we mean by that is that, it's not a day or two or, a week that you have this thing. You have this condition for a long time, for months, for years. And they are as a result of many, many factors, and disproportionately affect persons from lower and middle income countries. And the World Health Organization defines NCDs, well, there are 4 main types. What they call the cardiovascular diseases, the ones that affect your heart and your blood vessels, like stroke, heart attack. You have the cancers, you have the chronic respiratory diseases, and you have diabetes as the big 4. But you see their mental health sort of underneath all of that. And I'm sure every single one of you in here knows somebody that has an NCD. Every one of you in here. So where do I want to take you? Hopefully now it's less than an hour because people said so much about me before. 4 key areas. To go over just very briefly, my early years, a little different from what you have heard. Health through the social lens. I'm going to share some of the research I have done. Some of them have been mentioned, but I may give you additional details that you didn't hear from persons. And I'm not going to get too in-depth on it. I want to also talk about where do I think things are now? What are some of my current perspectives and some next steps? So here we go. I really hope that you will learn something at the end of all of this. My early years, I am the only child of the union of Joseph and Levis Cunningham, both of whom I'm very deeply indebted to for providing me with a very, very solid educational foundation. Both of my parents are from very humble beginnings, and this is where I started to get my insight into the social side of life. My father is from inner city Jonestown, urban poverty. My mother from rural, up in the hills of Clarendon, a district called Diamond District. You saw pictures there, very near to a place called Rock River. And if you go further down, you hear about Chapelton. Up until today, there is not piped water to my relatives in Diamond District. So they now use this big black drum, and they are able to get water in that way. And I attended Vaz Preparatory School because in the early days, we lived in Harborview. It is near to the airport for those of you online who are non-Jamaicans. If you come to Kingston, Harborview is a community there, and really had a great time at Vaz Preparatory School. Really, really enjoyed my time there. I was involved in so many things, and a fairly decent student too. And awarded, left school on a government scholarship for St. Andrew High, which when I got it, I had no clue where St. Andrew High was. And Marion Allison Vaughan, her aunt is my godmother. She told my parents, send her to St. Andrew High. And we just said, okay, and we put St. Andrew High down. And wow, what a school. Where are my Andrews girls? What a school! St. Andrew High School for girls. But before I leave this little bit of memorabilia, just look at those two names that the arrow points to in blue. Debbie Thompson, also in that scholarship list. Michelle Ann Musang from Wolmer's. They would end up being in my medical school class. What an interesting life. So while I was there at St. Andrew High, I really developed and furthered my love for math and for science. My music continued, which had started at St. Andrew High, and I was involved in student leadership. And I'm bragging here, I don't know where Rainford is, he probably left, but we actually won a race at Gibson Relays, you know. The under 15. And just moving on, I went to sixth form at St. Andrew High and wanted to be an engineer, a chemical engineer as a matter of fact. But I changed my mind. I changed my mind because I missed biology that was so very well taught to me by my teacher, Yvette Boothsmith. Can you raise your hand for me, Mrs. Boothsmith? She taught me biology so, so well. So happy to see you here today. And by the time I left St. Andrew, I did a year in natural sciences at the time, entered med school. You saw this picture, but that's me, just in case you didn't recognize it. And there is Heather standing beside me again. All right? And med school was great. This is Professor Tay, who taught anatomy, and you see Mr. Cyril Fletcher too, who taught us anatomy, although he was a surgeon. And we had a grand time. We were in medical school during Hurricane Gilbert. And it was tough. And I remember it was maybe our third year, it was second going into third year. And just a little humor here. You see me with three other ladies to the top left. That's the group, because this is a concert where you raise funds for charity. And we got special permission from Heather's father, who was a judge at the time, to have the smoker at Campion's Auditorium, where everywhere else in the country was in darkness. I think there was a generator there. And so there were some good fun times in medical school, and that group was called the Dockets. The Dockets. And we did old hits. And I think you're seeing, is that Lisa? Is that Lisa at the front there beside me at the bottom left? Ophthalmologist par excellence. But anyways, graduated in 1991, and then came this unexpected journey. You would have heard about the postgraduate diploma in management studies. Why did I do it? In finishing medical school, a lot of the training is in the hospital. I thought that doctors needed to be trained more in management. I thought it was an era of weakness. And so I looked around, and there was this course that was being offered that was part-time for 3 years. I'm not going to go over every one of the things that we did. It's there on the slide, and you're all people that can read. But what I would say, one of the courses that held me in very good stead is organizational theory and behavior. Very, very good course. Wherever you work, the competencies in that hold you in good stead, whether you're a lawyer, a doctor. And I found it helped me and maybe gave me an edge over other persons wherever I went. So excellent training in management and leadership, the precursor of the Master of Business Administration. And when I finished internship, my classmate Denzel Reed, who I hope is online, if so, Denzel, give a thumbs up, please. You know, we have to get into the digital age, right? He told me he would be migrating to the States, and he had been doing voluntary work with the Diabetes Association, which Professor Morrison mentioned earlier. And that's how I ended up going. He said, just during your lunchtime, once a week, go. And that I did, and that I've been doing for many years. But in going there, I met this podiatrist, Mr. Owen Bernard, an ex-British Army soldier, but Jamaican heritage. And we started to do a lot of work around the island. We would do health educational talks, train people on diabetes. He would teach people how to care their feet for this particular condition. And one day he said to me, Colette, you've done a lot of work. You know, the Netherlands government, they have this grant giving away. If you can find some area of educational training, you can use it. But it has to be done in a year. And having my management studies thing, what else in health teaches you a lot on management? Public health. And I decided to go into public health, mixing the management with my medical training. I applied. They were offering a $5,000 grant, $5,000 US, I must say, grant. And I applied and couldn't take it up because I became pregnant with one Stephanie. And the next year, I reapplied and got the grant. And I was able to pursue to enroll and pursue the Master of Public Health. And I just want to say a little bit about that. At the time, a lady by the name of Dr. Denise Eldemayo, and she was newly married, named Shara, was the coordinator. I remember her sharing pieces of her wedding cake with us. Peter, you remember? Peter Knight? Yes, where are you, Doc? Somewhere up there. I just remembered, wow, we're so special. We got a piece of her wedding cake. But what I want to say about the MPH at that time, it was a fantastic course. The class had a mix of doctors, nurses, every specialty you could, represented in health. And we had to do a lot of group work, which I hated, but it was important for the training. You can't be a public health leader if you don't understand how to deal with people of various backgrounds. And we did all kinds of courses, but my favorite were epidemiology, research methods, and biostats. And these were my study partners. Do you know any of them? Heather Reed Jones, who you saw there, and one by the name of Karen Webster Carr, CD, national epidemiologist. So we were study partners, and we then all went off into our different areas of public health. But I want to tell you, the research that I did, because of my work with Diabetes Association, I wanted to look at tertiary prevention of diabetes by doctors at the primary care level. Now, some of you in here have no clue. What's tertiary prevention? When a person already is diagnosed with a condition, the strategies that you use to prevent a worsening, the complications, disability, and death are known as tertiary prevention strategies. And so I wanted to see what were doctors doing in the field with regards to diabetes, because I hypothesized that it wasn't going so well. And so my sample included doctors from every parish of the country, and what I found was that these long-term complications, that there were guidelines about the frequency in which they were supposed to be monitored, were not being monitored the way they should. Eyes weren't being dilated to see if the diabetes had started to affect the blood vessels at the back of the eye, what we call retinopathy. Foot examinations weren't being done. You're supposed to be doing that, and don't look at me that way, because some of you look like they're not doing it right now. But these are things that should be done, because what you want to do is to prevent people losing their toes and their feet. You want to prevent people from going blind. You want to prevent the kidneys from being destroyed. So you should be checking for early changes in the body. Microalbumin is a protein that is excreted in the early stages of problems with your kidney. They were not doing that. What were they doing instead? Instead, they were just focusing on taking people's blood pressure and checking their fasting blood sugar. And that, and that's just not good enough. And these findings I presented at a conference, that conference that, I can't remember which of the tributes spoke to regarding me getting this Best Young Researcher Prize. Somebody came up and mentioned it. The Ministry of Health at the time, and they said, present your work. And I went, and I was the last speaker on that day. And a guy by the name of Kennedy Cruikshank, when I went up, he grilled me. grilled me for half an hour. And that, I suppose I was impressive enough that they decided to give me this prize. At the time, too, when I finished the Master of Public Health, we were looking at what were the main causes of death in Jamaica. And I finished around 1999, but still, as you'll see in this slide, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, ischemic heart disease, which means, the circulation to the blood vessels in the heart, not so good. Hypertensive diseases, these were in the top leading causes of death. And so I applied for a job at the ministry, wanting to tackle chronic diseases, right? And when I got there, something unexpected happened. Within a month, Dr. Karen Lewis Bell, who was in charge of disease surveillance, said to me, listen, Professor Figueroa, no, he was Dr. Figueroa then, you need to go and head disease surveillance. I was devastated. This is not what I signed up for. But, I believe that my God, he directs our paths. And I was in charge of disease surveillance for 2 years. And most of it has to do with infectious diseases. And man, didn't I get a baptism. All kinds of outbreaks. The only thing I didn't have was a pandemic, which I left for my friend Karen. But I'm telling you, all over the place, we're into prisons dealing with tuberculosis, malaria at the Pedro Keys. You had people, anthrax was on the horizon, mad cow disease. I had to be dealing with the HIV epidemic still at that time. But I really became pretty solid in infectious disease surveillance. Just before I move on to chronic diseases, the most significant memory I have of that time was being involved in a case control study, one of the types of research studies around this particular parasite. Some spring breakers had come to Jamaica. They went back home, and within about 3 weeks, the CDC was getting complaints from all over the US about these people. The only connection was that they came to Jamaica. And they had this parasite. They identified this parasite. They had to send the cerebrospinal fluid to Asia, and they had this condition called eosinophilic meningitis. What happens? The parasite gets into rats. When it gets into the rats defecate. They defecate, and then on the things like lettuce and so on, the parasite is left. And you don't wash your vegetable properly, you eat that parasite. So you don't necessarily see it, okay? It doesn't usually cause a lot of problems, but in those spring breakers, it did. Thankfully, I don't recall any one of them dying. And in the end, we found out it was that the common thing that they all ate was a Caesar salad. A Caesar salad, yes, that they had eaten. And I then met John Linder. I used to collect rats for John Linder to dissect. It was quite an interesting time. But I got tired of infectious diseases. And after 2 years, said to Professor Figueroa, I want to switch. Time come. I want to switch. And so I switched to chronic diseases. And when I got into that portfolio, I have to tell you, the program was not very well developed at the ministry. There was only a single program officer, and I work in nutritionist by the name of Mrs. Violet Griffith. And I wrote the first strategic plan, very elementary. I don't even know if they can still find it. So elementary it was. But we did our best. But after 2 years, I realized that my supervisors would direct me to either Professor Terence Forster or Professor Rainford Wills for advice on chronic diseases. And after a while, I wanted to understand the research more. I wanted for us to generate more local evidence. We didn't have a lot of our own evidence. Other countries' evidence was being used as ours. They were making estimates. I wanted to be really involved. And through Michelle, my friend, Michelle Musang, she said, up at TMRI, they need people, talk to Marvin. And he is correct. He did invite me out on that lunch date. I don't think I've ever invited me on another lunch date since. All right. Why, Marvin? I've done well. Anyways, so for the remainder of this particular section, I will highlight research done from a social lens. Some of them you have heard about as well. So let's go. Now, the TMRI, unexpectedly, as I said, I went there. That's not really where I wanted to go. I wanted to go to EPI. But I always feel that sometimes when you take these opportunities, in the end, you will get to where you need to go. And so I started out in sickle cell unit, but interestingly, this is now in the 2000s. Interestingly, the WHO started to realize that a lot of the health outcomes were because of social determinants of health. And they had set up this commission chaired by a guy by the name of Sir Michael Marmot. And they ended up producing a report, and this was going to help us to understand how could we tackle inequities, because inequities, it was thought, was driving some of these social determinants of health. As you see there, a definition. Health inequities are unfair and avoidable differences in health status seen within countries. And so, if you are able to reduce these inequities, you really can improve on human development. Now, this particular diagram, a lot of people see it in presentations. It's a model developed by Dahlgren and Whitehead in 1991. And what it really represents are the layers of influence on health, putting the individual at the center, and around them the various factors that can influence health. Your individual lifestyle, what you eat, who you are around, who you live with, your working conditions, whether you're educated or not, your housing, and those global policies. And I know my friends in the US right now are realizing how global policies and politics can influence your health. So it's not just at the global level, but it also comes all the way down to the local level. And so the next slide is going to show you what these social determinants of health are. So if you have come to any of my classes, you'll recognize these slides. Conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, and age. And it also includes the health system. Now, this framework was put in that very report on the Commission on the social determinants of health. And what they try to tell us is that there are two main determinants: structural determinants, and these really are those broader socioeconomic and political contexts in which you are born and live. And these circumstances are shaped by money, power, and resources. And based on that, you may get unequal distribution, which shapes a person's socioeconomic status. Those structural determinants you see there operate through intermediary determinants. Right here, I don't know if my arrow is there. Oh, you're not seeing the arrow. Perhaps I need to put the laser on. Let's see if it works. So it operates through these intermediary determinants to influence what your health outcome is, whether you have diabetes, whether you have hypertension, you have stroke, etc. And the bridge between those determinants is social cohesion and social capital. And in simple terms, what is social cohesion? Social cohesion is a connectedness between persons, how connected people are in groups. And social capital is the value that is placed on that sort of grouping of persons. You see, too, the health system is very important there, because the health system impacts on the type and quality of healthcare that is available in terms of, and how it will influence your health outcomes. So for the remainder of this lecture, I'm going to briefly share a few select bits of research that I have done that provided me with greater insights on this social determinants of health, that social lens to health. And you'll see in red the areas that I'm going to be focusing on: health system, material circumstances, governance and macroeconomics, and socioeconomic position. So we're moving on. Are you with me, class? Yes. Are you with me? Very good, very, very good. So, health economics. Now, you've heard about this study. It was mentioned by somebody, one of the persons that gave tributes, the Caribbean Commission on Health and Development. So remember, I started out in sickle cell unit, right? But within 6 months of being there, the head of the Tropical Medicine Research Institute, that's what it was called at the time, Terence Forrester, called me to a meeting. He said, Colette, you know, I'm a commissioner on this particular commission, and we want to cost diabetes and hypertension. We've been trying to get people to give us the data from the various countries in the Caribbean, but we're not getting anywhere. Can you help? And indeed I did, because I remember being in disease surveillance, I had to attend a lot of meetings within the Caribbean. And so I was put in touch with a young economist out of the SOSI called Abdul Kadri, by the name of Abdullahi Abdul Kadri. He was the health economist, I was the epidemiologist, and we provided estimates on the burden of diabetes and hypertension. And we went to 7 Caribbean countries, but in the end we could only do the analysis on 4. And what I hope to show you here is the information on what we call direct costs and indirect costs for diabetes, hypertension. And what we found is that the highest overall cost as a percentage of gross domestic product for diabetes was 5.21% for Trinidad and Tobago. And the country that had the highest for diabetes was Barbados. Sorry, hypertension, that's an, oh, you're following, man. You're not asleep, even though you're in this thing so long. Okay, so we were able to write up a paper on that, and I was also able, at the insistence of Sir George, who, being Chancellor, would send for me whenever he came to Jamaica, and get a call, and he must come to his office, because you must write a paper. And working with him was a journey. Listen, you have to be teachable. You have to have humility. The first time I wrote a draft, he just ripped it. Sir George, you're hearing me? Ripped it to shreds. And I went home, my God, the Chancellor don't like my work. And then I said, but is the Chancellor and him call you? Come on, brush it off, Colette. Try again. Because obviously he thinks there's something in you to invest in. And that I did. And was also able to have my very first authored paper out of that study. My focus was looking at health information systems. And what did we find? I know you're far away, you might not be able to see this. What we found is that you collect data on diseases in the hospital. There's another system that is costing it, but the two systems never come together. They are not interoperable. And that's why you have not seen a lot of the sort of work you're expecting, because you have to have systems that are interoperable to be able to do things like this. So I was able to write up on that. And you heard about the Port of Spain declaration that came out of it and that meeting that we had. And interestingly, the guy to the bottom right is a classmate of mine as well, Dr. Kenneth George. He had attended that meeting as a representative of Barbados, and at this time he's now Chief Medical Officer. And so that report that you heard about, this is just a picture showing us, presenting it to Sir George when it was completed. Another unexpected path for me was, again, Professor Terence Forrester calling me to a meeting. Colette, listen, got some money from Jamaica National Building Society. And we want to look at how assess the health and economic status of microcredit beneficiaries versus non-beneficiaries. So I'm sure you asked the question that I asked, what's microcredit? What's microcredit? And what I learned is that it is a financial tool. It's really helping people with, to start small business. They can't access these big loans that most of us have. And at that time too, published in the literature was the work done in Bangladesh, in Grameen brand by this guy, the founder of the bank, Muhammad Yunus. And he had shown that if you give people microcredit, it would play a role in improving their economic and social development. And so we started the study wanting to look at, wanting to look at whether the people who got the credit, if they're compared to people who didn't, if their disposable income in their household would be better, if they would feel more secure in terms of their income, if their children's health and their own health would improve, and if their health would improve so much that they start to overeat, and perhaps start to have the emergence or the occurrence of risk factors of chronic diseases like diabetes and hypertension. And so we got the data set from Jamaica National, and we knew where these people lived. We went into their communities. We asked them different questions. We measured their weight, their height, etc. And we compared them with people in their communities that did not get that loan. And we, as you see there, we focused on those 3 parishes. And what were the key findings? We found that the persons increased in weight, but also, unfortunately, obesity. The children were even more obese. The children of the beneficiaries were more overweight and obese than those who did not get the benefit. We also found that their income in the household really improved, and they even had greater home ownership than the persons who had not been beneficiaries. So some of our hypotheses or assumptions were proven. And I think you heard about the award that we got for this project. At the time, it was Professor Shirley as the principal. And we also published in this journal, Tropical Medicine and International Health. You would have heard that I made a switch to Epi Research Unit because I wanted to become an independent researcher, and also now, after almost 9 years in that institution, a post finally came up in Epi Research Unit. And so the young guy handed me over to the not as young guy. And I continued to do some work there, deciding by then now, the second Jamaica Health and Lifestyle Survey had come out, and you will see a description of what it is about, asking people about whether they have certain chronic diseases, whether they have the risk factors for them. They also would measure people, to see what their body mass index is, and we'll talk about that a little more. And also, the interviewers, it's not on your screen, I don't know why you're not seeing it, but the interviewers went into the communities and assessed the way the communities looked. Assess the way inside persons' homes are, to just get a sense as to, disorder or order. That's the status of the built environment. And what I undertook, the data had already come in. I did a lot of work with what we call secondary analysis of data. So you had collected the data for a special reason, but we were able to interrogate the data for some new research questions. And the first paper, guess what? On my favorite topic, diabetes. And we looked at the sex differences in the burden, risk factors, awareness, treatment, and control. And we found that the women had a higher burden than men, and we were finding that from some earlier studies as well, out of TMRU. We found that a lot of people were not aware that they had diabetes, as much as 76%. That's big. The women in the urban areas, the men in the rural areas were likely to be unaware. And we also found that control was low. But look at this. The richer men, their control was worse. But the richer women, their control was better. And so we started to think that with these, what we call sex differences, there may be gender underpinnings. Is Leith still here? Leith, you're hearing the word. Leith is a gender specialist, Leith Dunn. And so that work was telling us that we may now need to probe a little deeper under gender. Sex is not equal to gender, the sociologists will tell you. Sex has to do with biological features, whereas gender really has to do with what role society thinks that persons should, how they should feel, how they should behave, how they should live. So you will see from this slide, certain jobs they think are for men versus for women, certain roles, as I say, attributes of being male, being female, they are different. So my research was starting to show that there may be gender underpinnings. You heard about the Fulbright fellowship as well, because this now gave me an opportunity to get some people from overseas. I heard people talking about their collaborator from England, their collaborator from Canada. I wanted my own collaborators too, from overseas. And so I applied and was successful. I hope you recognize the university registrar is in the back. So he was in that batch, but he went to do his he went to do his doctorate, where I was a Humphrey Fellow. It was a 1-year fellowship. And below was what I wrote in that summary for the program plan, wanting to look at deepen my understanding for research, management, and control of the social risk factors. And just a few pictures. I really became a citizen, not only of Jamaica, but of the world when I went on this. I recommend fellowships for any academic. Really gives you a different viewpoint, an insight into the world, and the world in relation to where you are from. And so to the top left are the fellows. I think there might have been, I can't count, but maybe 11 or 12 of us. And from time to time, it's something that the United States Department of State is responsible for. So they would invite us to different functions. To the bottom left, I went back to Emory and I was trained at Emory with Heather Reed Jones in epidemiology by this guy here named Phil Brackman, and he had invited Jimmy Carter, ex-president, to give a speech on social justice. He had his autobiography, and that's him signing a copy that I took. And I also met my great friend and mentor, Catherine Thiol. And I really owe Catherine a debt of gratitude for the way she has brought me forward in terms of this whole area of social epi. When I came back, you heard about that I wanted to look at geographic information systems. This is unexpected. Now, this is not what I went to medical school to study. All of these, just a lot of new things coming at me. But I had to learn about geographic information systems and worked very closely with Paris Leo Ayi Jr. and Lisa Gay Green. I think Lisa Gay is somewhere here in the audience, somewhere, I don't know where. Lisa, you're not putting up your hand. But she, too, a specialist in GIS, and we worked to put out a body of work that looked at geographical variations and their associations with health outcomes, particularly the NCDs. Now, just moving on, wanting to say that I had come back from the fellowship. Whilst I was in Tulane, I used to sit into classes. Many persons said to me, Colette, we like the way you teach. And I got a word from my father, the heavenly one. He said, when you go back to Jamaica, do a bit more teaching, especially at the undergraduate level. So I came back, was at ERU, and a post came up over at Community Health and Psychiatry to lead Year 5 clerkship, and I made the switch, but keeping my links with TMRI on research projects. And so in this, you see the driver that drove me as a student in medicine. I was now working with him as a tutor, Mr. Winston Bobby Grant. And from time to time, I would always visit the students, as Heather Reed Jones said in her tribute. And this is the previous dean, Minerva Thamanai, in the field. And Dean Plummer, you still need to go in the field with me. That's where real health is practiced. You've got to come in the field. It's not the hospital only. Okay, so shortly after, I really started to zoom in a lot more on neighborhood determinants, and I also enrolled in the Doctor of Public Health program. And what I'm showing you here is really a diagram by a social epidemiologist called Anna DeRue out of the United States. And what she was suggesting is that there are possible pathways through which the physical and the social environments, those structural determinants that we talked about in that big picture, influence outcomes of health, all right? And these are things like body mass index, blood pressure, etc., how your neighborhood is structured, availability of resources, etc., availability of food, social environment. So I'm hustling because I know that some people are a little tired. And I wanted to look at obesity as an outcome. It's also known as adiposity. That's the fancy word. And it really is measuring high levels of fat in your body. And there are different ways to measure it, as you see there, body mass index, how your waist circumference, with the waist circumference to hip circumference, waist circumference to height ratio, different ways. And for that body of work, just talking about two of the papers that I worked on, we were able to look at distance to what you call proximity and density of certain things. Open spaces, public spaces, supermarkets and markets, because we thought those places would be places that you can get fruit and vegetable better. Fast food outlets, which we say, you're going to get a lot of processed food, too much high sugar food, and the social environment. The MonaGIS had information from the Jamaica Constabulary Force, and we were able to look at that and also be able to understand its association with obesity. And so we wanted to see if those physical spaces the lack of them would lead to less physical activity and obesity and be stronger for women and poorer people. We found it was worse for middle class. So that was a surprise to us. And that's something that we need to continue to figure out why, right? Is it that poor people are just always walking so they would just not be obese? Maybe that might be part of it. So what we call a confounder. The other thing we wanted to look at was the supermarkets. We said less of them, the further you were away from them, our markets, you would have less healthy diets, more obesity, and worse for the lower class. we found middle class again. So there's something about the middle class. Is it a vulnerable group? I need a sociologist to help me with this for future work. And we also found women who were further away from, living further from supermarkets and markets became more obese, or we saw the association with more obesity. For fast food outlets, we thought if you had more of them, your diet would be worse, more obesity, and stronger for poor people and people who live in urban areas. We found the opposite. It was worse for rural residents. But in keeping with kind of the way our hypothesis was, you had less fat among men the further they lived from the fast food outlets. Final one here, the crime, greater crime. So maybe be afraid to go walking and so on, more obesity, and worse for people who live in urban areas and women. What we found, it was just for the urban residents that we found that. And we published our findings as well. The next story I want to go on, and I can go very quickly because Marvin spoke a lot about it, was Emancipation Park. In that one, he assisted me. We couldn't get a lot of funds, and we got enough money for a pilot study, including our friends out of Tulane as well, helped us because they had been exposed to a systematic way that you could observe movement in parks. I'll just share a little bit on that. We wanted to get an idea out of Emancipation Park, the usage patterns and energy expenditure. Because when I worked at the Ministry of Health as the medical officer for chronic diseases, Emancipation Park was a dust bowl. And the National Health the National Housing Trust. Dr. Davis here, you were chairman at the time? No, you weren't chairman then, right? But the National Housing Trust, they were going to use some of the funds to help to build out this park. And what a beautiful park it is. Diana Ashley, who was my boss, said at the planning meetings, you must put down a track and put signage so people know how far they have walked. You must put places in it that people can run and walk and jump. And so years later, I would see people using it, and I wanted to know why they were using it and whether they were using it for health. So we conducted a study over 1 year using this thing called SOPARC, System for Observing Play and Recreation in Communities. That's me there. We got a map of the park. We mapped out 27 areas that we were to scan. We scanned them systematically. And we were trained how to, based on the activity of the person, measure using certain validated physical activity codes, know how much energy they were burning, how much energy, the energy expenditure in different parts of the park. And what did we find? Females used it more than men, moved more in the evenings. Of course, as expected, men were burning more. They were the ones running. The walking track was used heavily. Sometimes there's no space on the walking track. And the people told us about location, safety, security. Those were benefits of it. So I'm not going to go through this one because the hour is late. And we were able to publish this, and also was one of the prizes that I cherish the most. I really do. I am really winding up this particular part of the presentation just to say that by 2016, 2017, we were now into the 3rd Jamaica Health and Lifestyle Survey, and I was promoted to being a co-investigator. So I wasn't just looking at the old data, and I was one part of the team, and I was responsible for the introduction of a new module looking at what? Neighborhood, this thing that I had done a lot of work in. And introducing a module that had subscales looking at people's perception of these neighborhood characteristics around crime and safety, physical disorder, social disorder, as well as a term called collective efficacy. Remember on the diagram I showed you the bridge with social cohesion, right? Don't know if you remember. Are you sleeping now? Oh, no. All right. And I'm not going into any more details, just to say 2 papers have been published, which you can look up online, that has utilized collective efficacy and social cohesion, etc., in the analyses. Who moves in vulnerable Caribbean neighborhoods? We wanted to see who are the people that live in these disordered neighborhoods that still exercising the way they should. Very interesting, the characteristics of those persons. And another one, not an NCD like diabetes, but mental health and depressive symptoms, also assessed neighborhood disorder and depressive symptoms, and the role of crime. The role of crime. So when you see the crime levels dropping in Jamaica, people in those communities tell you that they are exercising more. They are going out and they are walking now because they feel safer to go. And research like what I do helps to quantify the gains that you can make. So what are my current perspectives? Am I doing well, less than the hour? Yes, I'm really moving it. Come, Marvin said everything about me. Current perspectives. When I went to look at the Global Burden of Disease website, in 2023, what's causing most of the deaths? And you can see them there. Stroke, diabetes, ischemic heart disease, chronic kidney disease, and hypertensive disease. That's what's causing most of the deaths. And if you put in any other country in the Caribbean, it's a similar picture. And most of these deaths are premature deaths, occurring earlier, because you're going to have to die from something one day. But you don't want to die too early. You want to live long, like my mommy. Right, mommy? You want to live long. But a lot of the deaths are premature. I remember one of my children's kindergarten teacher dying of a heart attack at 31. So, you don't want people dying that early. On this slide, what risk factors are driving most of the death and disability? And look there for 2023, high fasting blood sugar, high blood pressure, high body mass index, talking about obesity here, dietary problems, and the kidney dysfunction. Remember, I told you that a lot of patients are not being monitored for their kidney function. Back in 1999, same thing happening now, Why? Why? I really think the reason lies behind the fact that the social determinants of health are still, I don't know if CMO is here still. She gone? Still not being adequately addressed. And it's hard to address them. It's not easy. And I believe going forward to make meaningful gains, it will really necessitate interdisciplinary collaboration, a lot more than we currently do. And this whole of society approach that with the Healthy Caribbean we have spoken about a lot. Now I'm going to frame my perspectives in the health promotion strategies from the Caribbean Charter for Health Promotion developed in 1993 and still relevant today. And I'm just going to touch very, very briefly on some of these healthy policies. You see this thing about this sweetened beverage tax? I'm for it. I'm against bans. So I've had, disagreements with bans. I think sometimes when you ban something, people want to use it more. So I've never been a proponent of bans and, had disagreements with my friends in Healthy Caribbean Coalition about it. But I'm for the tax. And not just the tax on sweetened beverages. I was happy the day when I heard that maybe salt, but then they changed their mind. And a lot of these policies I personally am for. And remember, behavior change takes time. Remember when you never had more than a beef patty, all you had was a beef patty? Now you can get vegetable patty. Sometimes the vegetable patty sells out faster. So I am for that sort of thing. I also would like more, it's actually, there's more incentive to eat bad. It's cheaper. And I think we need more incentives around costings, around diet, availability of grilled and baked products more than high sugar and starch. I see signs, but good food are keep down here. And you see pointing to places that serve very high sugar food, content food. My daughter told me when she used to do night duty at KPH, when you're on 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock answer duty, you can't find good food. Everything that you can get at that hour is fried, is sweet. And so these are the things that I think from a policy level need a closer attention. I also want to talk about, very briefly, about the supportive environments. Let me just go over here a little bit to my notes. Just a second, folks. I just want to look up something here. I'm getting old now, so I'm not remembering a lot of things. So I need my notes to help me. It's true, Michelle. It's true. The supportive environments. We spoke about that. Strengthening community actions. A lot of communities are much more aware now of health issues. You have a lot of wellness fairs, etc. And I think that is excellent. So I think that's a pro. One of the issues, though, is it needs to be guided by the science. And you see, when it comes to chronic diseases, sometimes the very best intentions are disruptive. And so we have cultures where, even you saw it in Melissa, people want to go out and they want to help. It helps to a point with chronic diseases. With the emergencies like you cut your hand and so on, that's great. But with chronic diseases, sometimes persons in communities are incentivized to attend some of these fairs and so on because there's freeness. They're on their medication. It gets disrupted because you come to the community. They're happy to see you. It's a good outing. That's applaudable. But a lot of times their continuity of care is disrupted. And they switch to these other medications. They come back to you in the clinic. They don't know what they're on. You don't know what's happening with them. And sometimes this sort of culture, it's really a set of strangers meeting a person rather than people who know their work situation, their home situation, etc. So I like the fact that communities are improving in their actions, but they must be guided by those of us who understand the science. In the development of personal skills, I want to just touch a little bit on human resources for health. And I'm going to get a little flack from you, my physician colleagues. It's 8 o'clock, so I'm going to finish up now. I actually don't believe we need a lot more doctors. I actually don't believe that. And I know some of you are not going to talk to me at the reception. I think the problem that we face is those social determinants. We do not have sufficiently skilled persons interacting with people on an individual basis to tailor. Diet is complex. You can do big ads and all of that, but I work at night, you work at day. It's hard. I burn more, you burn less. I sit more, you sit less. It's complex, and sometimes people have multiple problems. So I gather that for the diet nutritionists, maybe Jamaica needs about 50 according to World Health Standards. I think we need 500. We need that people can go to their health center and every day there is somebody there that can help them to work through this. Same thing for things like physical activity. Everybody can't run and jump. We don't have specialists that, like myself, I can afford to go to some physiotherapist or maybe a gym. A lot of people want to, but some of the things they are doing is making it worse. Elderly people should not be doing a lot of running and jumping because your joints are more fragile at that time. So I think we need a lot more of those other support groups to help to prevent the non-pharmacological management of these chronic illnesses. Needs a lot more attention, a lot more resources. People have to be paid better. Anybody agreeing with me? I don't know. But I mean, if you don't want to talk to me afterwards, my friends, that's okay. So that sort of reorientation of the health services, I'm not saying things are not being done now. I would never say that. I am seeing changes. I know there's going to be reform. Heather, you are leading the charge at the primary care level. But I just think there needs to be more. And it's going to come down to some economics, which is a challenge, to split that pie all over the place. So continuity of care here is important. Things Miss Toller Reed in the front row taught me health education. Don't you think that you tell people what to do and they're going to do it? So you need specialists that help us in how can we communicate this change. And you have to work with people over time. It takes time. Not just a one-off 10-minute consultation today and it's over. You have to come back to the person. What are the challenges they have? And come back again. How can we help you with this? Continuity of care is needed. Quick fixes just don't work. And so what are my next steps? Just a single slide to say these are some things I would like to do before I end my career, because I'm getting a little on in age now. I can now join the senior citizen line. The Jamaica Health and Lifestyle number 4. We're soon going into the field, and I've been able to convince the principal investigator that we must add a module on arthritis. Because as a primary care physician, a lot of people have arthritis. And it affects their quality of life and also some of those risk factors for NCDs. I would love to do some more geographic mapping of NCDs. And I also am inviting persons who would like to collaborate with me on some more qualitative research, getting into what Jamaicans would call the headspace. So we've mapped, people not doing this, they're not exercising, they're not this, but what is it that is causing them not to do it? So I would like to understand the psychology a lot, and also to work with folks on understanding the cultural aspects of our food choices. We know the historical precedents, with slavery and salted food, but Caribbean people, I went to a restaurant on campus, and 3/4 of the box was rice. 3/4. And just as the lady was taking that big spoon to do what? Pour the gravy. I said, no. And she said, you have to tell us not to pour it. We pour it on everybody's. Only don't pour it if you don't tell us not to pour it. And so these are some of the challenges. The final thing, I also want to do some more research on advocacy, an area that I've been involved in, but does it really work? We can feel good doing it, but does it really work? And that's something I'd want to do. Final slide for you today is on the lessons I've learned on my journey. For me, integrity at the heart of it as an academic. Integrity. And I'm telling you, in academic environments, it's easy for people to want you to do what's not right. And all those other things you see around. You have to have courage. You have to be teachable. You have to want to collaborate. You have to persevere. You have to be interested in quality stuff. And most importantly, for me, outside of integrity, you have to be humble. You have to take critique. That is what has gotten me this far. That is what has gotten me this far. I was able to listen to people, take critique, and move on. I know that you're tired. I can see it from up here. It's all Marvin's fault. And I just end by saying, are there one or two burning questions? I'm handing back over to the chair for Prof. Colette. 1L and 2T.
The ovation speaks for itself. Are there any of the questions that may have arisen? The floor is open, and I'm also monitoring through Damien if there are any questions coming in online.
They're gone to sleep. Clarity. It was clear.
I'm not sure if we have a...
No? So
I'm Claire Mackenzie, Power 106 FM, host of Farm Talk, and I'm coming at you from the perspective of working with farmers and people who are engaged in agriculture. And I think that there's a missing link. There's a disconnect between the food that is being produced, the cost at which food is getting to people, and those lifestyle diseases that you talk about. And I wonder if perhaps going forward some research can be done in that area. How do you make that connection between the food that is produced and the cost at which it gets to people so that they can step away from some of those lifestyle issues that they have?
Oh, for those online, I have to repeat what you said. And so I think you're asking me that in our context, we are realizing that the food that is produced is coming out at a higher cost, and therefore affecting the ability of persons to have that diet that we as health providers would like them to have. Far more fiber, far more fruit, vegetable, etc., less sugars, etc. That is where I do collaborative work, because it's the health economists that tell us about those things. They tell us it has to do with a lot of things called economies of scale. And in these larger developed countries, they are able to produce those goods at a much, much cheaper cost. And that's why you can even import them at a cheaper cost. And when you are that person, when you have your disposable income, which is not much, a lot of times the choice is what's cheaper. And I think, I don't know if I need to do research. I really think it's more a policy decision that the governments have to look, or our government, how can you incentivize it? And some of that may have to do with what are they paying for fertilizer or so on to be able to produce, food. You hear people, even with Melissa, the complaints that have been voiced by the farmers. Remember when the price of a pepper went up, and it really has to do with the globalization and economies, and it's easy for places near to us to just dump, certain food at a much reduced cost. And I think further work would need to be done in collaboration with our health economists to see if they could inform governments by showing them the cost of illness burden, that you can save this if you do that. So there needs a lot more work, and we need good data for that. Thank you for the question. Any other? Oh, there are some at the back. I don't know if there's a mic. I'd ask for a microphone in case persons wanted to ask questions. I don't see the microphone, so yes, I'll repeat whatever you say for the people online.
So very recently, the Minister of Finance would have announced that a new array of taxes should have included some taxes.
So he's saying the Minister of Finance in Jamaica announced a new array of taxes on sugar sweetened beverages. Yes.
And that would have resulted in a certain level of pushback from leadership players.
And he's saying, I'm just repeating it, that it has resulted in pushback from key industry players.
Right. So I'm basically asking in terms of the role that in terms of balancing the economic impact of such taxes versus the necessity in terms of improving the health of everyday Jamaicans.
So he's asking what role can epidemiologists and public health specialists play in navigating that challenge of, the pushback, as well as the fact that, persons need to live and, am I saying it correctly? Yes, and you're saying what role should they play? But we have been playing the role. And so there have been the studies. It has not been the same in every jurisdiction, let's be honest. Not every country that studies have been done on putting a tax on sugar-sweetened beverages has shown that it necessarily influences the purchasing of these items. And I don't know if there's any that have gone on very long to see if there's an impact on obesity. One of the things we teach in epidemiology is that there are always many other factors that can be playing a role into the relationship that you want to look at. And but why the minister speaks so stridently about sugar-sweetened beverages is that research has already been done within this country regarding the use of sugar-sweetened beverages, and it was found that the sugar-sweetened beverages were increasing obesity levels. So it's based on some of that evidence why, as epidemiologists, that information was shared with the ministry and why they are so strident about this particular tax measure. Yes, thank you. Hope you understood my answer. People looking a little like we need to go until, yes, the time. Marvin is the fault.
All right. What a journey, what a lecture, what questions, what steps for the future. It is often said that the university's motto is Orion's ex occidente lux, a light rising from the west. I think after this lecture, I can say the light is still rising in the west. Not just rising, but shining. Thank you, Professor Colette.
May I take my seat now?
You may have your seat. I think that functions like these, which represent a celebration, it represents an opportunity to expose the professor's persona and the professor's prowess and the professor's fluency and the ability to communicate in such simple language accessible to the layman. That's why she's such an excellent teacher. That function cannot go ahead without so many people and be successful without so many people involved. And at this point in time, I'd like to call on Dr. Stephanie Myrie, who you already know has the Myrie connection, to give the vote of thanks.
I'm a bit tall. Yeah. Yes. Good evening. Yep, good evening, everyone. So many people liken gratitude to a compass, one that guides every successful journey. Well, it has guided me on a very long journey from England to stand here before you today to deliver this vote of thanks. It is my privilege to extend gratitude to those who have contributed to making this evening such a success. As we gather to both support and celebrate the Department of Community Health and Psychiatry's newest professor, Professor Colette Cunningham-Myrie, or Prof. Colette, we are reminded that occasions like these are only made possible by the collective effort, diligence, and benevolence of many. It is without question that I begin by thanking the person who has brought us here tonight. Our guest honoree, Professor Colette Cunningham-Myrie, who we have seen to wear many hats, a brilliant academic, a teacher, leader, mentor, friend, and my favorite, of course, a selfless and loving mother and an undimmable light to our family. I thank her for inviting us in and taking us on this tour following the twists and the turns of her journey, her academic and research endeavors, and impressing on us the magnitude of the impact of the social determinants of health. We thank you for your work so far and the legacy that you will continue to build as you now wear this hat of professor. I'd like to thank Dr. Kenneth James, who is the head of the Department of Community Health and Psychiatry and who has chaired this event, for his brilliant and captivating opening remarks, his quick wit, the props, and for keeping us thoroughly entertained throughout the program. I extend gratitude to Reverend Ralph Hoyt, who led us in the opening prayer, reminding us of God's continued presence and calling us to revere him for his ability to use us all to fulfill his purpose. I'd like to give a special acknowledgement to all those who did video tributes, to Senator Dr. Kenneth Connell, Drs. Heather Reed Jones, Aileen Standard Golson, Novi Younger Coleman, Craig Brown, and Professors Errol Morrison, Catherine Thial, Marvin Reed, and Rainful Wilkes. We thank them for the time taken to express their admiration, heartfelt congratulations, and to give us insight of the breadth of Professor Cunningham-Myrie's inspiring influence nationally, regionally, and internationally. I'd like to thank the Dean of the Faculty of Medical Sciences, Professor Joseph Plummer, for giving us a synopsis of Professor Cunningham-Myrie's remarkable journey and setting the stage for this much anticipated lecture. I'd like to give special recognition to the planning committee, whose names should be on the screen. And we just want to thank them because they had met on a weekly basis over the past few months to carefully curate this unforgettable experience that we have had today. As I look around the room and I am admiring the beautiful decor, I really want to big up the event planners, Alison Dexter and Karen Johnson, who are lifelong friends of Professor Cunningham-Myrie, or even sisters, and they have allowed us to celebrate together in our own little paradise. I'd like to thank the university singers for a moving and powerful performance, which truly warmed the atmosphere tonight. We cannot forget the other key contributors from the Department of Community Health and Psychiatry, the Dean's Office, the medical students, and the MITS and the FMS IT team for their seamless coordination and outstanding work behind the scenes. Lastly, I'd like to thank the audience who are both here physically and online for your presence and invaluable support, because who would the teacher be without her students? As I close, I would like to emphasize that this evening is not only a celebration of Professor Cunningham-Myrie's achievements, but also a reflection of the strong community that builds and uplifts the Department of Community Health and Psychiatry. Thank you all for being part of this memorable occasion, and I invite you to give a round of applause to all those involved. Thank you.
Very soon. And just as we prepare to have the UWI singers return to the stage, and we are winding down, I am reminded by one of my old members in the church in the country that whenever you have a function, you must always, before you end, say something like this. To all them the smaddy, who name we should have called to make other smaddy know say them as smaddy, they are as smaddy. Uno smaddy will love you the same, even though the name never call. So I will ask the UWI singers to come forward. Stupendous, melodious, mellifluous, sweet like diabetes mellitus, nicer than a Julie Bango. Want to thank you again. Brevity, it is said, is the soul of wit. I have neither soul nor wit, so I will stick with brevity. And so, good night, adieu, guten Nacht, walk good, drive good, even if it is not a Benz. And I want to invite you all to, to join Professor Colette, Cunningham-Myrie and all the community. Professor Colette, engage her in the reception afterwards. Please enjoy the food. The catering has been done by Mark Chung, and you will enjoy the setting in the Agora to the music of Ozune and the Pamfire Band. And I want to acknowledge the band members, Ozune Sundaraya on keyboards, Ricardo Camber on drums, and Carlton Jarrett on bass, who will provide the entertainment. Walk good, walk good. See you know.